Hey, it's Chris Herbert, and welcome to my Monday morning podcast for March 17th, 2025. This is my third week in my 90-day experiment, and I'm looking at the view count on YouTube so far for my last two, and we've hit the astounding record level of maybe 40 views. uh, so, this is an experiment where um, I don't know what's gonna come out of it, to be honest. But I am committed to doing this for 90 days, and it's funny. 90 days is actually just you know, that's going to be 12 podcasts. Um, so today I was talking to my wife, saying I have no idea what I'm going to talk about in today's podcast. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, so what would that look like next week in the final and the week after that, etc. Um, because let's face it, there isn't a lack of things for people to watch and listen to and read in today's day and age, is there? And the marketer in me would say, well, what's your target audience? What are you focused on? What's your objective? I have some personal reasons why I'm doing this, which I might share later on as I become more comfortable with talking about some of the personal reasons. It has to do with family. I'll leave it at that for now. But like I said, when I was talking to my wife today, I was thinking I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. So I'm right now upstairs in my home office looking out the window at a blue sky on a sunny day with a lot of the snow that's accumulated since uh, the last couple months going away very quickly. Looking forward to a nice spring and a wonderful summer. Interesting thing that happened over the weekend is because the snow is melting so fast and there was so much of it, um, uh, our basement's leaking, and we're not the only one. Everywhere where I look around me, um, at the hardware store, on two occasions I had to go to Canadian Tire um, to buy a sump pump because our sump pump wasn't working anymore. And you'd think an obscure thing like a sump pump, there wouldn't be anybody else in a large store like a Canadian Tire with tens and tens of thousands of products for sale, that there'd be anybody else looking for a sump pump. And guess what? On the two occasions that I went into Canadian Tire, first of all, to get the wrong sump pump, and the second time to get the right one, there was people buying sump pumps. So our the water's been flooding the basement, and this we had to get a sump pump that basically. Um, aren't you enjoying listening to this podcast? All 12 of you, um, in terms of what I'm covering. But it was an interesting thing that happened over the weekend. The irony of, or the lack of irony, maybe, I don't know. But going to buy a sump pump, and everybody else is buying sump pumps. Get home, get the sump pump operating. Our neighbor calls us. They've got 15 inches of water in their basement. They need a hose for their sump pump. Um, yeah, so here in Grey Bruce, where we live, we had a heck of a winter. Lots and lots of snow, and it's melting pretty fast, which will potentially be problematic for the farmers. Hopefully not. I hope they can get out and start planting as soon as possible. Yeah, so I guess that might have been the highlight of my weekend. It's getting the sump pump working. Um, yeah, so as I was saying, really didn't know what to talk about. in this particular podcast. So it might be brief, or I might ramble on about stuff that's utterly boring as I make things up. Um, I've been doing some interesting things with what's called, discovery interviews with both new entrepreneurs who have just started their business over the past year. And then we're also interviewing what we call experienced, established entrepreneurs. And those are the entrepreneurs that have lasted lasted through time running a business of their own or running multiple businesses, but are still actively involved. And we have a program through MI6 called Area 81, which we've launched. We soft launched it. We're not aggressively promoting it yet because we're building the program. But part of the exercise to build that program is talking to these different entrepreneurial segments and understanding what motivated them to become an entrepreneur, what motivated them, or what motivates them to stay as an entrepreneur. Now, there's an interesting segment that's emerged out of the new entrepreneurs, and these are these are side hustle entrepreneurs. A couple of them young, in their early, or I'd say mid 20s. And interesting listening to them about why they started a side hustle and how they're being supported by the entrepreneurs that that they work for. So it's really cool to see that an entrepreneur, whose employee has started a side hustle, is being supported by that entrepreneur. We need to see that a lot. Yeah, it's not so much that I would like to see entrepreneurs, create a side hustle group within their business. But if there's an employee that wants to do a side hustle, and they're transparent and open about it to that entrepreneur supports them. Obviously, they have to set some guardrails. But what's really interesting is that in these two instances, the entrepreneur didn't mutually exclude this new entrepreneur from doing their business. So what I mean by that is they're figuring out ways how that side hustle entrepreneur can actually integrate their work activity into their day-to-day jobs at the other business, which is kind of cool. So here's an example. One entrepreneur has to do deliveries. That's his job, but his side hustle is requires him to deliver his product too. So his boss said, well, when you drive out to do a delivery for what you're being paid to do as an employee of my company, go ahead and use the truck to deliver your own stuff. It's pretty cool. Another entrepreneur has actually had his side hustle entrepreneur employee sitting on meetings, and that side hustle entrepreneur is wearing their side hustle hat while it's been a business meeting for the entrepreneur's business. So it's really cool. Hopefully I'm not confusing you with those examples, but basically what the support isn't so much just encouraging them, but figuring out ways how the entrepreneur can sort of weave that entrepreneur's side hustle into their business, which is kind of cool. It's really interesting, this whole notion of having really deep conversations with prospective customers, members, prospective partners, and really just seeking to understand, what motivates them to do the things that they do. It got a bit ridiculous, in my view, in that, I had to learn how to do these types of interviews, and some of the examples that were given to me were interviews of somebody who, decided to buy a laptop bag, a bag for their laptop and all of their business stuff. And we're talking like a 45-minute interview trying to get into the mind of that buyer in terms of why they decided to go with the laptop bag that they purchased. And it's not really ridiculous, but it seems kind of maybe unnecessary to go in that much detail, but it doesn't, if you listen to this interview, you really get to understand, what that person was thinking, why they decided to buy a new laptop bag, et cetera, et cetera. And more importantly, it sort of teaches you the discipline of, how to sort of, what's the right word? Discover as much as you can about what motivates somebody to do something. So the broader context when it comes to entrepreneurs, what motivates an entrepreneur to start a venture? What motivates an entrepreneur to continue to do what they do, and run their own business versus going to work for somebody else? It's quite interesting. And what it's also making me understand is that these types of conversations have to happen all the time. Now, do you spend 40 hours a week, having 45 to 1 hour interviews with entrepreneurs or whoever your target customers are? No. But it's something that you need to weave into your weekly process, is having conversations with customers and seeking to really understand what motivates them to do what they do in the context of what it is you offer, right? Or in the context of a problem you're trying to solve. Whether you're an entrepreneur yourself or whether you run a department, you work at a company, you work for a government, that sort of thing. And this kind of flies into what I'm seeing with society today is we always skip stones with everything. What do I mean by that? I mean, think about scrolling TikTok. We can only devote 30 seconds of our attention to a piece of content, and then we got to see something else, and then something else, something else, something else. Whenever we're asking for a summary, it's like, well, give me the highlights, right? People zone out after you speak for more than 30 seconds. I got news for you. You need to get deep into understanding things. You need to read. I mean, the whole notion that people don't read, or they can't read, or they don't have time to read. What a load of bullshit. It's just, we skim the surface of life. Whether it's a relationship, whether it's a conversation, whether it's something we want to learn, whether it's something we want to get good at, we always are looking for a shortcut or a simple answer. I'm going the opposite way. I'm going deep. Okay, so what else are we doing this week? Going to play in a squash tournament, the Ontario Squash Championships in Toronto. I'm in the Masters 60 category, hoping to place well in that. Then I got a tournament in April, mixed B tournament. What's really cool about this tournament is it's mixed, so it doesn't matter what your it doesn't matter what your gender is. It's available to anybody that can play at that level, and we really need that, especially for women players and juniors, especially junior girl players that are really at a competency level that they need to compete against players, adult players, in order for them to improve. And we have a lot less women players in squash, so it's really cool that the women players can play in bigger draws, as long as they're comfortable with playing with the odd guy yahoo that's a little bit of an ape, an alpha personality, because that can happen with some of us guys is we take things too seriously, or we might get, we might get peeved that we have to play a woman in our division. Um, I remember playing the top woman player in Canada when I was pretty good player, and I got my ass kicked. Um, and I'm glad to say that I was fortunate to play her, and I didn't take it personally, and didn't pull the man card or anything like that. But I still see that. I still see, and even in league, house leagues, where the odd guy is a little too alpha, male-ish, misogynistic, a little too aggressive. I don't know if that's the right word, but anyway, hopefully there's fewer of those types of guys around. Yeah, so that's about it for this week. I guess what I'll probably be spending some time on is thinking about if I need a structure for these podcasts going forward, so that anybody that wants to come and listen to the next one kind of gets a sense of what I'm going to cover. I think Bill Burr, he always has some form of rant, I believe. He's always talking about something that's in the news a little bit, I think. So I might even think it through in my podcast in terms of what I want to cover. Obviously, I want to talk about entrepreneurship. I want to cover some of the things, that are on my mind that day. Some things that happened to me over the weekend. But I don't really know whether people really care about that, right? So, and maybe over time this will evolve into something that's a little more concrete, so that people know what to expect. But again, it is a 90-day experiment, and it's my way of recording something, to leave behind a little bit. So I'm kind of tipping my hat a bit in terms of why I want to do this. I have family, and it'd be kind of nice to, even though I've got a lot of years ahead of me, it'd be kind of nice to, to leave something for my family to listen to and have. Should it be on YouTube? Probably not. But this is one of the reasons why I'm doing this. So I think about my grandkids and my girls and my family and how much they mean to me. They're just so important in my life, and sometimes it's maybe it's not that apparent just because we're at different places, geographically, and we're wrapped up into our day-to-day lives. Same with friends. We all know that we probably have a handful of friends, and sometimes we know they're always nearby when we need them, but I know we don't see them enough, and maybe we spend too much money watching Netflix and doing things that are convenient versus things that should matter more. I don't know. Anyways, I continue to make this a lot deeper than it probably should be. So that's it for this week. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.